Today I'm bringing you my reading wrap up for the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Challenge 2025 into 2026. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I will leave a link to the information in the description, but it's basically a year-long reading challenge. There's a bingo board, there's various spaces, different prompts that you need to fulfill. There's a regular mode, hard mode. It's not that complicated, but I don't want to waste time trying to explain it because this is going to be a long video. There's a lot of books that I need to talk about and I don't want this video to drag on. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to put a picture on the screen with the bingo board. We're going to go through each one and I'm going to give you hopefully short and succinct reviews for each book. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because a lot of these books I have talked about in the past year at some point. We're going to kick things off with Knights and Paladins. This I was worried about. I thought I was going to struggle with this one, but then I picked up Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mehra, which is the second book in the Assistant to the Villain series. This is basically a cozy romantasy series that has a satirical fairy tale vibe. It's basically, imagine if Shrek was a romantasy. That's what you're getting into with this series. I really like it, but I have noticed that it's quite divisive. I think because it's quite fun and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and humour is so subjective. Some people, I've noticed, just don't get along with the humour, which is completely fine. It makes me laugh out loud and I'm so invested in the romance at this point. Even when the plot is kind of messy and there's not much happening, I'm so invested in the romance between the characters. It's kind of a workplace romance. The main character gets a job working for the villain of this world, and yeah, the fourth and I think final book comes out this summer, which I'm very much looking forward to. Next up we have Hidden Gem, and for this I read Talon Sister by Jen Williams. I actually spoke about this in my most recent vlog, so I will leave that linked just in case you missed it if you want to see my thoughts as I was reading. But Jen Williams is a UK author who doesn't have an American publisher, so this isn't easily available in the US, and I think that's why it currently doesn't have as many ratings on Goodreads. It is so underrated in my opinion though. If you can get hold of this book, it's only a duology and I have now completed the duology and it's so good. It was a solid 4-star duology for me. It has really unique world building, it has horror elements, and it's really fun. It has kind of a old English folklore kind of vibe. A lot of the book takes place in this forest setting and yeah, like I said, so underrated. I think so many people would love this. Next up we have Published in the 80s, and for this I read Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. This is the third book that I've read by this author, and like all of her books, I found it very thought-provoking. It was fascinating. It was very surreal in parts. It's basically about these two long-lived shapeshifters, one who is a healer and one who is a killer. It has a big focus on eugenics because one of these characters is obsessed with how genetic traits are passed down through generations. It's about the relationship between these two people. The way that the power dynamics were explored I thought was just so intense, and it spans over several decades, if not over 100 years. Technically this is part of the series, however it was written to be a prequel and it comes first chronologically. So when I was doing some research, apparently like it's fine to read this first, and I do plan on continuing with the other books in the series. The next prompt on the board is high fashion, and when I first saw this I thought, oh no. It seemed really like it was going to be tricky. However, I was reading The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, which is the third book in the Lies of Locke Lamora series, and I realised this was perfect because this, if you don't know, follows a group of con artists, and as part of, you know, having to pull off these cons, quite often they have to make their own outfits, disguises, that's the word I'm looking for. And in this, fashion has even more of a focus because the characters are putting on a play, and one of the characters in particular is involved in making the costumes. This is part of a series and you do have to read the series in order. However, what I found is that each book has a self-contained plot, sort of. The second book actually ends on a cliffhanger, but there's enough of a satisfying ending where I don't mind having to wait for for the next book. I know that there are more books planned in this series, but it's been a while since The Republic of Thieves came out. Next up we have Down with the System, and for this I read Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Groudin. This is a YA historical alternative history speculative fiction. A lot of words there, but the whole concept behind this is what if Germany and Japan won World War II? It follows a teenage girl who is part of the resistance movement, and her next mission is to take part in this motorcycle race across the world because the winner gets to meet Hitler and her mission is to kill Hitler. One of the most unique books that I've ever read. Even just listening to that synopsis, it sounds like it's going to be really unique. And yeah, it was very fast-paced, very action-driven, even had a couple of twists that I did not see come in. Next up we have Impossible Places, and for this I went with Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. This was actually one of my most disappointing books of last year. I gave it 2 stars because I was bored. It follows 2 grad students who go on a mission through hell to try and rescue their professor, and the setting of hell I don't think was used to its full potential. It was really not that interesting. It kept going off on these tangents that I just did not care about. The romance didn't do anything for me, and the only thing I really liked was the main character has these flashbacks to the past and her time in academia, and the commentary on the sexism that she experiences. That side of things, I thought, okay, there's actually some substance here that is keeping my attention, but otherwise I really struggled to care about any of the stakes because I just did not care about the characters. For a book in parts, I had a few different options, but I decided to go with Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a short literary sci-fi that starts in the 1920s and spans, I think, hundreds of years. Really liked how this felt like a mix between historical and futuristic sci-fi. It has beautiful writing, it's very slow and quiet. You have these different timelines following different characters, and it felt very satisfying, but quietly satisfying, seeing it all come together. This was my first Emily St. John Mandel book, and it definitely won't be my last. I have seen some people say that all of her books are linked, and so you should read them in a certain order. I didn't have any issue with reading this as a standalone. There were certain points where I felt like I was missing some backstory for a character, but if anything, it just made me feel more interested in reading her other books. It didn't affect my overall enjoyment. Next up, for Gods and Pantheons, I read Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. This is a standalone romantasy that is set within the Crowns of Nyaxia world. Really enjoyed the romance in this. It's a slow burn, which is something that I think Carissa Broadbent does really well. Carissa Broadbent is one of my favourite romantasy authors. I think she does such a good job of building tension between characters, and the spicy scenes never feel rushed or out of place, just a natural development of the characters' relationship. I can always really feel the emotional connection between the characters. In my opinion, you don't have to have read the other books before reading this if you don't want to. I think it really depends on what you're reading it for, because it does sort of recap some of the world building to do with the gods, which is relevant. Obviously you would get that if you read the rest of the series and it wouldn't feel as jarring. But if you're reading this just for the romance, then I don't think you need to have read the other books in the series, and I think it would give you a good taste of Carissa Broadbent's writing. Next up we have Last in a Series, and for this I finally finished the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. I read Kingdom of Ash. In fact, I read most of the books in this series last year, but I finally finished it after it being on my TBR for such a long time. I do have a whole spoiler-filled reading vlog for the series. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll leave it linked in the card and in the description. But basically, I liked this series. I felt like it peaked in the middle for me. The beginning was kind of weak, and then the ending I don't think was the most satisfying, but the middle few books, I think from around Queen of Shadows to Tower of Dawn, those were my favourites. It's the least romance focused out of all of Sarah J Maas's series. I think it gets unfairly labelled as romantasy when, for me, even when it does get more romantic further into the series, the focus always feels like it's on the plot. Next up we have Book Club or Read Along, and for this I went with Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Adyehi Brenya. This is a near future dystopian novel about the American prison system, system. There's this program that prisoners can join where they fight like gladiators in an arena for the chance to win their freedom, and it's become this whole televised sport that people follow. I liked how it showed different perspectives of various people, including the prisoners, but also the fans of the show and the organisers. You also see into the mindset of the people who were protesting against this programme, and yeah, I thought this was really compelling and engaging. The writing felt a little bit clunky in places, but otherwise I thought it was really impactful and thought-provoking. I think it would actually be a really good book to read as part of a book club or to have a discussion about. Next up we have Parents, and for this I went with Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller that follows a guy who wakes up in a facility and he's being told that the life he remembers isn't his life, and it's about his desperate struggle to get back to that life and to his wife and son. This was a thriller. It has non-stop action. It has been adapted into a TV show, and I can see that because as I was reading it, it was playing like a movie in my mind. The main character spends a lot of time reflecting on his life, and it talks about the choices that we make and the repercussions of those choices, and I really liked that angle and that theme. I feel like this kind of has the vibe of a Marvel movie, but without the superheroes, so if you're looking for that in book format, then I gave this 5 stars, by the way. Epistolary was actually one of the prompts that I struggled with, not because I was struggling to find a book, but because I was struggling to narrow down a book. There were too many books that I could choose from for this, and it is a format that I tend to like. I ended up going with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, which I thought was really cute. I liked the snowy Nordic setting, and I liked learning about the fairy folklore. We follow a main character who is studying fairies, and it's got a kind of romance between her and her academic rival. I didn't feel the most invested in the romance, and something else that I struggled with is when I read cozy books, I want them to be slice of life with very low stakes. While you do see Emily going about her job, I think the stakes felt a bit forced. So I got a little bit bored because I wasn't that invested in the stakes. Still gave it 3 stars, and I can definitely see why people love this. I think it was more of like a personal preference thing. There's quite a few books that I could have chosen for published in 2025 because I do tend to read quite a lot of new releases. However, the one that I went for is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. This is such an adorable, cozy fantasy about a witch who lost her powers as a teenager. Not fully, but she has nowhere near the power that she had the potential to have. But now there may be an opportunity for her to regain her powers, and it's a book about found family. I thought it was adorable. Even though I had minor issues with the romance and the plot, I didn't care because I love the characters so much and it made me cry. Just the way that the characters were so accepting of others because they have been in situations in the past where they've been made to feel unwelcome. It melted my heart. Next up we have Author of Colour, and for this I went with The Good House by Tananarive Due. This is a horror novel that's actually quite long. I think it's over 500 pages. It follows a woman who inherited a house from her grandmother, and one 4th of July something tragic happens. Maybe something supernatural was involved. It has a lot of emotion, which I actually tend to really appreciate in horror. One of my favourite subgenres of horror is actually grief horror. Not that I would say this is grief horror. I feel like overall the tone of this just really worked for me. It has creepy moments, it has tension, suspense, and really complex layered characters. Definitely worth the time investment, even though it is on the longer side. For small press or self-published, I read Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. This is a murder mystery, but set within a fantasy world. Feels kind of like our world, but there are fantastical and paranormal elements. It follows a main character who is a monster hunter. So she is tracking this shape-shifting monster, and she tracks it to this grand manor house that is essentially a bed and breakfast. And yeah, she's trying to work out who the killer is out of the people there. I thought it was a really fun time. If you are looking for a book that feels like an Agatha Christie novel, but in a fantasy setting, I think this delivers the vibes. So it wraps up like a standalone, but apparently there is a sequel following the main character, presumably investigating a different crime. Biopunk is a prompt that I thought I would really struggle with. However, I read the entirety of the Wayfarers series last year by Becky Chambers, and A Closed and Common Orbit, which is the second book, I think fits this prompt perfectly. I think this is also my favourite book in the series. I gave every book 5 stars, but there was something about this that just really affected me emotionally. I think it was the character storylines. There's 2 main characters that you're following. One is an AI who wakes up in a human body and they feel uncomfortable in this body. They're trying to adjust to this situation in a world where it's not allowed. AIs aren't allowed to inhabit physical bodies. So you have that storyline alongside the backstory of another character who is helping that first character. There's something about Becky Chambers' writing that is so heartwarming and comforting, but it also has characters that really go through it. They go through these difficult situations. And yeah, this made me cry. For Elves and Dwarves, I read Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldry. This is the 3rd book in the Legends and Latte series. This has a main character who is going through an existential crisis. She falls asleep after a very drunken night, and when she wakes up, she finds herself on an adventure with an elf and a chaos goblin. It has a lot more action than the previous books, but it also has so many fun moments, and I really enjoyed following the characters. There were moments that made me smile and laugh out loud. Next up is LGBTQIA protagonist, and for this I went with Emberclaw by L.R. Lamb. This is the 2nd and final book in the Dragonfall duology, or Dragon Scales duology, which is set in a world where humans and dragons once lived in harmony together until humans betrayed dragons, stole their magic and banished them to a parallel world. It's now centuries later and humans have forgotten what happened. They worship dragons like gods, but the dragons haven't forgotten and they are desperate for revenge. The main character in this is non-binary and they accidentally bring the last male dragon through into the human world. Everything about this book intrigued me. I loved the atmosphere, the magic system, the enemies to lovers romance. Would recommend if you want a dragon book or a dragon series with a queer norm world and dragons that feel more human than animalistic. They felt more like dragon shifters to me. For SFF short stories, I read The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This is an incredible speculative short story collection. So many of these stories have stuck with me long term. They were really hard hitting. I actually bought my dad a copy of this collection for Christmas because I was convinced that he would like it too. It made me really excited to read something full length from this author. I have the Dandelion Dynasty on my TBR, which I'm hoping to get to at some point this year. For Stranger in a Strange Land, I picked up The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley, and unfortunately this is one that was a miss for me. It's about a woman who works for the British government and she's assigned to be a handler for a guy who has been brought forward in time. He would have died in his time anyway, and that's how these people have been selected, is because the government obviously don't want to mess up the past and have it impact the future, but the government are observing this group of people who have been transferred through time to see how they adapt physically but also psychologically. I think this was trying to be too much and it ended up feeling really messy. It had a romance, it also had thriller elements, and I found the whole thing very jarring. So yeah, didn't love this one, unfortunately. For Recycler Bingo Square, I went with I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman because there was a space on, I think it was the 2020 bingo board, to do with reading something that had been translated, so translated fiction, which this is. I believe this was originally published in French and I read it in English. It follows a group of women who are being kept in a bunker underground and they have no idea what they're doing there. The main character is the only woman who doesn't remember a time before this bunker because she was the youngest when they were brought in, and this causes conflict and differences between her and the other women, and it is a fascinating character study. I love quiet literary sci-fi like this that really haunts you. I read this months ago and I can't stop thinking about it. I also really appreciated how it doesn't give you all the answers. Instead, it encourages you to come up with your own theories, and for that reason I think it would be a great book to buddy read or read as part of a book club discussion. For the cozy square, I picked up A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne. This is the sequel to Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, a book that I did enjoy. I gave it 4 stars. Didn't enjoy the sequel as much. I found the plot just a little bit boring. I would also describe this as adventure fantasy. It does have cozy vibes, and I think that's part of the problem, is that I struggled to believe in the stakes. I found them kind of pointless. I do like that this series follows an established sapphic couple, and I thought it was fun how in this one they were playing matchmaker and trying to get 2 childhood best friends to finally admit their feelings for one another. It was good. Sometimes it edged into cheesy, but it was still a fun time. It was an enjoyable read, and I do have the 3rd book. I think there's 4 books in this series overall, and I do plan on continuing it. Ironically, generic title was one of the prompts that I really struggled with, considering it's all about reading a book that has a common fantasy word in the title. I really struggled to find a book that would fit this, but I went with The Bone Hunters by Stephen Erickson in the end. This is the 6th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I have a whole video on my channel where I talk about Malazan spoiler free, so if you're interested then I will of course have that linked, but otherwise I don't really have much to say about this because it was the 6th book in a very long series. This was actually one of my favourite books in the series though, I can tell you that. Not a Book was quite an easy prompt to fulfil because I do tend to watch a lot of movies and sci-fi fantasy TV shows, but the one that I've put down for this square is Sinners. This was my favourite movie of last year. I loved everything about it. I thought the acting was incredible, the cinematography, the music, the atmosphere. If you haven't seen it yet, then I am jealous because it's one of those movies that I would love to watch again for the first time. Just the intensity and the tension and the build-up, oh, it was, yeah, phenomenal. And the final space on the board was Pirates, and for this I went with Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is a standalone novel set within the Cosmere universe, and I think it's a great place to start if you are looking to get into the Cosmere because it is a standalone. It wraps up, follows a woman whose best friend goes missing and she's in love with him, so she takes it upon herself to set off on this quest to save him. I've heard that this was inspired by The Princess Bride, which is a movie that I've never seen, but I liked how it subverted what you might expect. The magic felt scientific, and I love it when magic feels very logical in that sense. There were some twists and turns that I didn't see come in. This, I think, delivered a cozy vibe, but the stakes still felt believable. The only thing that I didn't actually like about this book was the writing style. The narrator telling the story breaks the 4th wall, and I hate it when that happens. It's a writing style that just does not work for me, and it always takes me out of the story. I think it does say a lot that I still gave the book 4 stars and I really enjoyed it in spite of hating the writing style. That does bring me to the end of this video, so thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments if you were taking part in the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Challenge. Let me know which space did you find the hardest and what book did you read for that space in the end. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.